That last note that you ended on, I think, is one of the key messages I hope people are going to remember, because sometimes it seems very far away. Why care, other than humanitarian reasons, why care about public health somewhere else, somewhere so far away? But really the single message from what's happening with Ebola now is what happens when we let public health infrastructures erode? What happens when we let people seemingly far away have no access to basic prevention? So it's my immense pleasure to introduce Nancy Aossey. She's president and CEO of the LA-based International Medical Corps, a global first responder that delivers emergency relief and training programs in areas affected by war, natural disaster, and disease. She's done really an extraordinary job. She was their startup CEO, taking them from 3 employees to 5,300, and just mammoth impact in all of the hardest hit areas over the past decade. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jody. So I just want to make a couple comments before I get started. If you feel a little bit like we're living in unprecedented times or dangerous times, there's actually a little bit of fact underlying all of that. As Jody mentioned, during the last 30 years, International Medical Corps has been at the forefront of every major disaster during that time. And right now, we have 6 Category 3, and Category 3 is the highest level emergency that you can possibly have. We have 6 ongoing Category 3 emergencies as we speak. And International Medical Corps is operating in every one of those emergencies. And of course, one of them is Ebola. We have more people displaced today, more than 50 million people, than we have had since World War II. And so to have that number of displaced, and on top of it, 6 emergencies, it means that we're all very busy, and if you get the feeling like, goodness, the world's on fire, there's actually a reason you feel that way. So we have been looking at Ebola and for some time. International Medical Corps has been based in Sierra Leone since 1998, as Annie mentioned. It was a result of the civil war there, and for those of you who saw the movie Blood Diamonds, this was a country really coming back. And because of our work in Sierra Leone, we had been looking at ways to get involved with training and combating Ebola in Sierra Leone, and we've done some work in Liberia. Something really important happened over the summer. When 2 Americans were brought back to the U.S. having had contacted Ebola, suddenly it was on the world stage. So for epidemiologists and public health specialists and for international NGOs that were involved in it, it wasn't anything new because we've been following the outbreak since the spring. But suddenly it was new to the rest of the world who paid more attention. And so with that, I'm going to give you a sense of what life is like after it is on the world stage of the news. And I'm going to show you a few news clips before I get into the rest of my presentation.
The World Health Organization says Ebola deaths could top 1 million by mid-January, tearing apart the social fabric in some countries and threatening the peace of mind in others.
This outbreak first started in Guinea in December and spread across the borders into Sierra Leone and Liberia, killing more than 3,000 people. A crippling lack of doctors and distrust of government have allowed this outbreak to explode.
We get our own assessment from one of the few non-governmental groups treating patients in West Africa. International Medical Corps has built a treatment unit in Liberia and is constructing other facilities in both Liberia and Sierra Leone.
Here we have 2 countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia, who are coming back from the brink of civil war. I mean, they have done so much to come back from where they were. And for them to be now dealing with Ebola on top of it, this crisis is a global crisis. It's a world problem. It's not just West Africa. We are all in it together. And we have to take the view that it is everyone's problem. And whatever resources it takes, we have to be there, because it's going to continue to spread if we're not there, and it has to be stopped and contained at the source.
admitted our first 2 patients on Monday night. It was actually a father and a son, and it was really difficult because the son was very sick, and about 20 minutes after we admitted him, he passed away.
I mean, what I've seen in Liberia is real hyper-awareness about Ebola. Everybody is trying to take all of the precautions that they possibly can to prevent contracting the disease. And there's a lot of fear around, and a lot of it is generated by the fact that there are not enough treatment beds available for people with the disease, and they know that if they get sick, there may not be a place for them to go.
We finally arrive at the Bong County Ebola Treatment Unit. It's been set up by doctors from International Medical Corps, supported by USAID.
4 hours by car, 2 miles on a muddy road through a leper colony to get treated.
And people do it because that's the only option they have. Started with 10 beds 12 days ago, and now we've gone to 25 beds.
You all seem like veterans.
Yeah, you learn quick.
Dr. Stephen Hatch, he's an infectious disease specialist volunteering at a clinic in Swakoko, Liberia, run by the American charity International Medical Corps. Now, before going, he wrote about why he chose perhaps the toughest job in the world today. He said, quote, "Why do firefighters run headlong to the fire? To put it out, of course. Ebola is not really different, and it is my fire, along with many other colleagues. I go to put it out."
Today was a tough day. You're asking me on a day when we actually admitted a lot of people who were relatives of our current patients. But I think that this is something that we must do, not only for the people of Liberia, but for all people around the world.
This is a disease that transmits itself by body fluids, and there's nobody who spends more time with the body fluids of sick people than healthcare workers.
Your clinic's been open for a month. None of your healthcare workers has been infected.
Well, it's not entirely surprising because I think our staff have actually had more training than some staff would have in the United States, because we're trained to do exactly what we're doing. This is all that we do here.
Is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Now to the Ebola fight, and here
From 10,000 feet, Osprey helicopter descends into the heart of the Ebola epidemic. For UN Ambassador Samantha Power, it's a close-up look at Americans on the front lines of the fight. Then a rough ride into the jungle to an Ebola treatment unit. The staff includes 10 Americans.
You can't really see it from here, but the other side of that is our triage area.
When you look at the blue buildings and the PPE spacesuits, this is a little otherworldly. There are tons of sad stories, but there's also a lot of cured patients. Statistically, that's fewer than don't make it. But when it happens, it's just a thrill.
Okay, so Annie did a great job of explaining why we are in uncharted territory in West Africa. Prior outbreaks were much more easily contained for a number of reasons that she gave. But because the disease, the outbreak, was not stopped in the beginning, as it continues to grow exponentially, as it is doing, you've seen the numbers, it becomes more and more difficult to stop, but it can be stopped. So I'm going to take you a little bit, so we're going to go to West Africa, and I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what it's like inside an Ebola clinic, an Ebola treatment unit, actually. So we had, as I mentioned last summer, been wanting to get deeply involved with Ebola treatment. And our challenge was, because it wasn't in the news, there wasn't really a lot of interest in funding the efforts. And so it wasn't until September when USAID's Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance awarded us $5 million to open up a treatment unit in Bong County, Liberia. That's about 100 miles outside of Monrovia. It's one of 2 units. It is a 70-bed unit, and I'm going to describe to you a little bit about what it does. So this is, of course, at the very beginning of the stage. We laid all of our own piping, et cetera. We started to build out the individual patient rooms with the cots, of course. And then one of the things you will see quite a bit in these photos is the constant disinfecting of everything. So in a treatment unit, you not only do you have to be prepared to, of course, receive the patient, one of the things you have to do is test them to see whether or not they have Ebola. So you've heard about the U.S. military has set up a facility there, and as a result of that, they have been able to clear up the backlog, and we know within a day whether or not someone has Ebola or not. this is our Liberian staff. Our Liberian staff are an important part of our efforts there. Right now in Liberia, we have about 230 staff members, and about 200 of them are Liberian health workers, and about 30 of them are expatriates. Most of them, or many of them, American. So you will see here that it's like any other health facility. There's constant consultations throughout the day. There's a lot of discussion about what's working, what's not, about tracking everything that we do. We have very, very strict protocols in place, and I'm going to describe to you some of these protocols. So when these are, we call these, we're going to call them for the, it's easier to call them PPEs. It's personal protection equipment. It's not just the suit, it's the boots, it's the goggles, it's everything that goes. There's a worldwide shortage of these PPEs, and that's one of the challenges we face. We need more of them. So it takes about roughly 30 minutes to put one of these suits on properly. And they have to be put on properly, primarily because if you don't have them put on properly, you will have a breach. If you have a breach, you risk coming in direct contact with the patient with Ebola. It then, once you're in the suit, it's so warm in there, it's so hot in there, it's about 110 degrees. So you can only wear the suit for about 1 to 2 hours. And in fact, the boots that are taken off afterwards have about this much liquid in them. Individuals lose up to 3 pounds of water in one of those suits. They also have a partner. We call it the buddy system. And the partner does the same thing, but the partner watches everything that his or her colleague is doing. So basically, the reason for that is when you're working in that kind of heat and that kind of difficulty, you know, you might make a mistake. And so the partner watches everything that their partner does, and then they stop treating a patient, and then they watch the other person. And that's one of the safeguards that we have put in place. After about 2 hours, they have to come out. It takes about 30 minutes to properly remove a suit. Once again, that's one of the important parts of the case management protocols so that infection doesn't occur. And then we discard that suit, and we have to get a new one. So it's one of the reasons there's a worldwide shortage. But you can see here how they're put on. There's a very specific regiment and a very, very specific protocols. This is another way, so they're taking the suit off, and as you see, the amount of spraying that goes on. So this was mentioned before. The viral load of an Ebola patient is heaviest right after a patient has died. And so a person is put in a body bag. If they've passed away, sprayed, put in another body bag, sprayed again, put into another one, and sprayed again. And then sprayers follow them all the way to a burial site where they are actually buried. There's a certain protocol so that they are buried and that people do not contact that. So we have, and I know my time is almost up, we have plans to put in to open up another treatment unit in Liberia. So there'll be 2 total treatment units, 2 in Sierra Leone, 2 Ebola universities, because we are a training organization and we want to train other health workers and other organizations that want to set up treatment units. We want to train them in case management protocols because we've learned a lot. And also have mobile support that travels from clinic to clinic as well. And we are very much involved in that. There are a lot of good stories. I mean, this is an Ebola-free patient. When they come out, everything they've come in with is taken away from them, and they come out and they're Ebola-free. And as you can imagine, there's and comfort. Here's a woman who came in that survived, and she went home. Her family was visiting her every day. So far, we have seen about 180 patients. 49 of them have died. 82 of them tested negative for Ebola and went home. We have 22 in care now, and 21 have recovered. So Ebola is treatable. It can be contained. And one of the most important things I want to leave with you today is that in order to really, really keep the world safe, keep people in West Africa safe, and to keep, really, we're a global community when you think about public health issues. It's not just West Africa, it's the whole world we should be thinking about. And the way to help ourselves is to stop it at its source in West Africa. And in order to do that, we have to applaud the heroic health workers. They're willing to go into places like Sierra Leone and Liberia under tremendously difficult conditions and are willing to carry out this kind of work. So of course, you know, we think that the health workers who are doing so much to help people in West Africa are also really doing quite a bit to help ourselves, and they are truly, truly heroic. The outbreak is dramatically outpacing operational efforts on the ground. That's the big challenge. We still have a window. It's not too late, but we dramatically need to scale up. International Medical Corps plans to have over 1,000 people in place by the end of December working directly on Ebola treatment. We hope that other organizations will join us, and we'll do whatever we can to train them and help them as well. But we have to get this stopped and under control before the numbers continue to grow exponentially. And any focus that is diverted away from West Africa is energy that is not well spent. So thank you.